here in these next couple months, because we're actually seeing a lot of resemblance of how his dreadlocks looked back in 2014, 2015 times. And it's just really cool to see his dreadlocks take that same path. And I'm really 100% positive that he's doing the same exact thing, but it's really cool to see that he's actually doing a full set of dreadlocks this time versus a high top fade. But before we get into today's video, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and comment down below who you guys would like to see next on the videos. And please subscribe if you guys are new, because I drop dreadlock videos every single week. But let's get into it. So first things first, like I said, we're seeing a very strong resemblance of how his dreadlocks looked back in 2015, and I just really love this stage. There's pretty much 3 stages you go through during the locking process. First stage is the initial locking, which is the method you choose in order to get dreadlocks. Like in Jaden Smith's case, I'm pretty sure he started out with either sponge or towel rub, because that's most likely how he did it last time as well. And how do you know that people start out with this method? Just based on how the dreadlocks actually develop. Like you can see that dreadlocks are still trying to be developed on the side of his head, but on the top of his head they're developed very nicely. And one thing you will notice is that there's skinnier dreadlocks on the top and thicker dreadlocks on the sides. And typically that's what the dreadlock sponge does. It works with your hair type. And typically everybody's hair type wants to create smaller dreadlocks on the top and thicker dreadlocks on the side. And that's one thing that I really like about the sponge, or even if you do just a towel, it's very complementary to your hair type. So however your hair naturally wants to lock up, all the sponge is really doing is speeding up that process. That's why a lot of people get confused or mistake freeform dreadlocks with sponge rub dreadlock, which we all know, or if you don't know, then now you're gonna know, is that if you're using the sponge, that's not freeform dreadlocks. Freeform is essentially just allowing your hair to freely form on its own. So all you're doing is washing the hair and allowing it to lock up. But with the sponge, you're literally maintaining it with the actual sponge itself. But it is really cool to see Jaden Smith go on that same route in order to get dreadlocks that look pretty similar to how he had them the first time. And like I always mention about this style of dreadlocks is how they just look very natural. And I like this stage because his hair is about maybe 4 to 5 inches right here. And I like when the dreadlocks stand up. It just looks really cool, very organic, and very freeform like. Although I don't believe he started out completely freeform, because his hair wouldn't necessarily be locking up this quickly, especially at his hair length and especially with his hair type. But one thing that really stands out about his dreadlocks is that the tips are very loose. And one thing I really like is that even though his tips are loose, they don't look as if they're outside of the dreadlock. They look like they fit his actual dreadlocks. That's one thing I really like about going the more natural route and allowing the hair to lock up on its own. Although he did initially lock it up using, like I said, either a sponge or a towel. And to be honest, he could have even done it with finger coils. But based on the look of his dreadlocks, it does look like he did use the sponge or the towel rub method. So with that being said, it is really cool to see his hair naturally locking up on its own after initially locking it up. Because like I said, you go through 3 stages. You go through the initial locking, then you go through the expanding stage, which is essentially the hair puffing up. So a lot of people go through that stage and like, why is my hair so puffy, or why is it getting fluffy and puffing up? It's because your hair is getting into the maturing stage, which is actually the 3rd stage, where in the maturing stage, everything tightens down and becomes even tighter and looks more mature and looks like an actual dreadlock versus being fluffy, because you go through 3 stages. You go through the initial locking, you go through the budding, which is the fluffing stage, and then you go through the maturing or the tightening phase. Now in this photo, we're able to see what his hair looks like actually wet. Now it's not 100% a clear picture, but this is a good representation of what hair actually looks like when it's wet and when it's underdeveloped. It's going to look like this. It's going to want to fuzz up. It's going to want to fluff up. And this is really what happens during the beginning stages of the locking process. So for everyone out there who started their dreadlocks and has washed their hair, or has went swimming, or has gotten their hair wet, or their hair just looks like it's frizzy and fuzzing up, that's to be expected. So don't get upset if your hair looks this way or if it's not looking the way that you wanted it to. Just understand that dreadlocks is a process and it takes patience to get to where you really want to go. And jumping forward into this photo, it's just really cool to see, the freeform like style of his dreadlocks. And it's going to be really awesome to see where his dreadlocks go, like I said, within these next few months, even in these next years, if he continues to grow them out. Because we did see on his first set of dreadlocks that he did let them go into kind of a freeform state. And he did use rubber bands to assist congoing and things like that. So I think we're going to see that again with his hair now. But overall, I just really like that look of the length actually being very tight and pulled together, and then the tips being very loose. It just goes to show that he's allowing his hair to lock up. And I would encourage all of you guys out there to allow your hair to actually lock up. And I think a lot of people get impatient and they just want to constantly be working on their hair, which isn't really a problem. It just really depends on what kind of hair you're going for. Like if you want Jaden Smith dreadlocks, you have to be patient and allow it to do its own thing. And obviously with his hair type being, you know, around a 4A or even a 3C, that's what the hair is going to look like. So you can't really expect to have your hair look like Jaden Smith's and maintain it differently than how Jaden Smith does and not even have the same hair type as him. So those are things to consider as well. And I do want to throw in this fun fact is that Jaden Smith was actually the first ever dreadlock review I ever did. So that's really cool to just say. Let's move on to this last photo right here. We're able to see the length of his hair. We're able to see that he's already getting some sun bleaching, which is actually really cool to see. And overall, man, I'm just really stoked to see his hair coming back to how it used to look, because he was my original dreadlock inspiration, and it's just really cool to see his hair length is about the same as my hair length right now. And for everyone out there who's watching this video, find someone who can inspire you in this process, and in those times to where you think you want to cut your dreadlocks or you don't like the way that they look, then have that inspiration there so that you can see it and constantly have that goal to keep going after. But you guys, that's today's video, so make sure to comment down below who you'd like to see next, and also comment down below what you think about Jaden Smith's dreadlocks. Like I mentioned in the last video,